And we're back with Act 3, Scene 4, which starts on page 129, but I'm showing you here what page 131 because there's not much to say on 129. Essentially, the clown is back, and this is actually an inverse of the first scene of this act where Cassio is seeking out Desdemona, and now it's Desdemona seeking out Cassio. But in both scenes, the clown is their messenger. So again, the clown is creating this idea of confusion with his wordplay. As you can see there, and Desdemona says, "Can anything be made of this? I don't know what you're saying. You're speaking in riddles." And again, there's that symbolism regarding that, which if you can refer back to Act 3, Scene 1, it's the same ideas that we talked about there. But it's just that interesting inversion. This is a very foolish idea for Desdemona to be supporting Cassio, for Cassio to be asking Desdemona for help. It's just playing into Iago's hands. Next, a few lines down here, the first line I've highlighted, Shakespeare makes it explicit to his audience that Desdemona knows she's lost the handkerchief by this point. And remember, it's Emilia who's taken the handkerchief when Emilia dropped it, but it's Othello's fault that it was dropped. And again, this is a great exploitation of Shakespeare's dramatic irony, as we know that Emilia is keeping the truth from Desdemona about where it is, and yet she very clearly says there, "I know not, madam." Lion. Okay, in line 20 then, just underneath that, Desdemona says, "Believe me, I'd rather lose my purse full of cruzados." So that idea that, she'd rather lose money than this handkerchief, it's more valuable than money. But she's grateful that Othello is made of no such baseness as jealous creatures are. Okay, because she knows that if he were a jealous person, the handkerchief could really send him over the edge of jealousy. But she believes that her noblemore is not of a jealous nature. Okay, so through this then, Shakespeare highlights that Desdemona and Othello have not really spoken since Act 3, Scene 3, because Desdemona has certainly not witnessed Othello in a state of jealousy. And it also highlights that perhaps Desdemona does not really know her husband as well as she thinks, because we have seen that he's very susceptible to jealousy in Act 3, Scene 3. So we can actually use this quotation as evidence to build up our argument that the fact that they're in such an early stage of their love makes them more susceptible to Iago's villainy, because actually Desdemona doesn't seem to know her husband particularly well. Okay, or is it that actually Iago is just such a genius that he manages to even make this man who is not susceptible to jealousy completely jealous? I think the first is more likely. Okay, so Othello enters the scene, and he finds it very difficult to hide how he's feeling, and he says, "Oh, hardness to dissemble here." And you see how it's an aside. So he's saying that to himself. It's very hard to hide how he's feeling. Now, although he does not have any proof at this point, he only has what Iago said that Cassio has dreamt and what Cassio has said to him. He's already treating Desdemona very differently, and this shows us the power of jealousy, that it's enough to really, Desdemona's done nothing wrong at this point, but he's already looking at her and seeing her differently. He says that her hand is hot and moist, which suggests she's lecherous. And Desdemona also states that she has not felt age or no that's how to say no sorrow. So this creates a sense of foreboding in the audience, because already in Act 3, Scene 3, Othello has threatened to kill Desdemona, albeit he's wanted to kill her in a quick way, but he's still threatened to kill her. So we sense that she will not actually see old age, she will never feel age, and she will know very soon plenty of sorrow. So it really emphasises Desdemona's innocence at this point. To the audience, we realise just how innocent she is at the very moment that Othello's trust in her is nearly, not quite, but nearly at its lowest point. So as an audience, we feel we're going in the opposite direction to Othello. Our trust in Desdemona's innocence is increasing, while Othello's is decreasing. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. Please excuse me. Okay, if we turn over to page 133, if my voice will hold out, please hold out. Okay, so a lot going on this page. Okay, so Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second. So on this page, Othello and throughout the rest of the scene, Othello and Desdemona fail to have a fluent conversation. They are very disjointed. So Desdemona attempts to once again move to support Cassio, and Othello dismisses this and asks for the handkerchief. And the reason he asks for the handkerchief is he's trying to check that she still has it in her possession, because Iago has told him that he's seen it in Cassio's hand. And Iago's been able to say that to Othello because, of course, he knows that he has the handkerchief in his possession and he's put it in Cassio's room. Okay, so it's just really unfortunate here that Desdemona chooses this moment to bring up Cassio again. It's a really terrible persistence that she's doing here. Okay, so he says, "Lend me thy handkerchief." It's an order, it's an imperative, and of course he's trying to check. Now this is a key moment. Desdemona lies here. Okay, I have it not about, well, I suppose actually this is not the truth. This is a white lie, because she lost it, but she doesn't, she's avoiding saying that, isn't she? It's true that she doesn't have it on her, but she's avoiding saying that she's lost it. Now, this is really central to what happens next. And at this point, you should ask yourself, what if Desdemona told the truth here? Now, we're not going to fall into victim shaming and say that Desdemona is to blame by lying at this moment for her death, because of course that's not the case at all. But always ask, what if? She's in front of Emilia. Emilia knows what she's done with the handkerchief. Maybe if she saw Othello reacting really strongly to Desdemona about her losing it, maybe Emilia would have confessed. We don't know. We'll never know. But regardless of that, I think that this scene is really important, and Shakespeare teaches us the value of open communication and the importance of honesty in a marriage. Well, in general, with anyone, we can see the damage that Iago's lies do throughout the entire play, but here we see the damage it does within a specific marital relationship. It's the only time in the play that Desdemona is deceptive in any way. Of course, she's deceptive to her father, but that's before the play begins, and it really does have significant consequences. So, Othello then does something a little bit, I don't know, I feel it's counterproductive in terms of the overall what he wants, but you can understand why he does it. So Othello goes into a lot of detail now about the handkerchief. Sorry, excuse me again. I'm really, really sorry. Okay, so we learn here the history of the handkerchief, which is actually a really interesting history. So an Egyptian gave it to his mother, who was a charmer and could almost read the thoughts of people. Now she says that the handkerchief essentially symbolizes monogamy and faithfulness. That she told her while she kept it, it would make her amiable and subdue my father entirely to her love. But if she lost it or made a gift of it, my father's eye should hold her loathed, and his spirit should hunt after new fancies. So this is the idea that the handkerchief had the power of making her husband love her and never want to cheat on her. But if she lost the handkerchief, then her husband would cheat on her and go after new fancies. It's actually quite a horrible idea that a handkerchief would have that power, and that a man would look elsewhere, or anyone would look elsewhere, if just because their wife or partner lost a handkerchief. But it's that idea of the fear of cheating that just seems to permeate the entire play, that that people want to believe that their husbands can't, or whoever can't, cheat on them just because they have this handkerchief. And obviously Othello is now telling this to his wife. It's loaded with symbolism what he's saying to her. He obviously feels that this is the case if the handkerchief has been lost, and he even says, or made a gift of it, because he suspects that she's made a gift of it to Cassio, that she's given it to Cassio. So you can see what Othello's doing here. He's trying to make Desdemona realise the significance of the handkerchief, to make her feel bad for what she's done because she's given it to Cassio. But of course, from Desdemona's point of view, all this does is highlight how precious this handkerchief is, and therefore it makes her very less likely to confess that she's actually lost it, which is important for him to find out the truth. Okay, now Othello, this is a sign that Othello has already made his mind up, and we see that at several points. He is looking for evidence that she has cheated. He is not open-mindedly exploring the possibility that she has anymore. Even though he has hardly any evidence, he's looking for evidence to feed his jealousy, because that's what jealousy does. It feeds itself, and we'll come back to that later on in this scene. Okay, he also says that on line 59 that she gave it to him on her deathbed. So obviously that his mother gave it to him at that point makes it even more important. But I just imagine having to say to your husband, oh yeah, this handkerchief that your mum gave you on her deathbed, yeah, I've lost it, I'm really sorry. It just makes it even harder for Desdemona. He goes on to say down here that there's magic in it. And this all this here is about how much work has gone into its creation. It just is impossible for her to admit it by this point. Okay, so on page 135, Desdemona sort of snaps a little bit and says, then would to God that I had never seen it. Like, oh, why have you trusted me with something so important as this? And, it's scary. It's kind of like if someone buys you a really expensive engagement ring and you think, oh my God, I'm definitely going to lose this. It's a lot of pressure on her. And it's but it's this point in the scene when actually she finally realised that Othello is not himself. So, she says here, why do you speak so startlingly and rash? This wherefore. She's finally realised that he's not himself at this point, and he's losing his patience with his wife. He's finding it hard to hide what he's feeling, and then he asks this series of staccato questions. So staccato, sort of a short rhythmic sentences. Is it lost? Is it gone? Speak. Is it out of the way? Yeah, and that's on line 76 here. These repetitive questions suggest a loss of control, a desperation to just get her to say, yes, it's gone. Yes, I've given it to Cassio. That's what he thinks she's done, and he just wants that truth out of her. And you can see here how disjointed their conversation is. It is not lost, but what, and if it were, how? I say it is not lost. They're not really communicating. Othello then demands, let me see it. And then this part of the conversation, until Othello storms off, it's just really disjointed and really tragic. And Desdemona, again, she's backed into a corner now. He's just highlighted how great it is, and how significant and important this handkerchief is, and she has no choice, she feels, but to lie and say it is not lost. Okay? Emilia is watching this happen and she is not saying anything. Don't forget that. Okay? So sadly then, Desdemona attempts to distract Othello from the handkerchief by requesting that he helps Cassio. Desdemona. So here, this is a trick to put me from my suit. You're just trying to distract me from helping Cassio. Let me ask you again. Please receive Cassio again. Pray you. Look at Othello's language here. He ignores what she says, and he just repeatedly says, give me the handkerchief, give me the handkerchief. And Desdemona repeatedly speaks of Cassio. Okay? Eventually, Othello gives up. He shouts, zounds, with an exclamative, and just leaves, because he's getting nowhere. And this is a really significant, terrible moment for their relationship that Desdemona, I don't think, grasps the significance of. She certainly realises she can't help but notice finally that there's something up with him, but we'll see in a second what she does. We can argue that Desdemona has gone too far here in her pursuit to help Cassio. This is very repetitive, very persistent, but of course she's trying to hide that she's lost the handkerchief. If only she'd have thought of something else to distract him with. And Emilia really shows some insight once, even though this is possibly Emilia's lowest moment, or maybe taking the handkerchief in the first place. She does show some insight once Othello leaves, when she says, is not this man jealous? Yeah. And Desdemona is very confused. She says, I've never seen it before. And she says how unhappy she is that she's lost the handkerchief. Still, Emilia doesn't say anything. And then Emilia ends the scene with one of the core metaphors regarding the role of women in the whole play. And it really does give us an insight into Emilia's experience with men. So, in this metaphor, we've got this idea that men are stomachs and women are food. So, men consume their women until they are full, and then they belch them out when they're done with them. So, this is presumably how Iago has made her feel, or perhaps if Emilia has slept with Cassio and Othello, perhaps they made her feel this way as well. Obviously, neither of that has led to a long-term, diet of Emilia. And this idea is built on later in Act 4, so do make sure you highlight this. There's more to say about this theme and this idea of women being food that men consume and then get rid of, but we'll come back to it in Act 4. But certainly that this is a symbol of the wider role of women, that they're there to serve men's pleasures until they're bored of them, okay, or saturated by them or sated by them because they're full. Okay, so going on to page 137. So Iago and Cassio enter. Okay, so basically on this page, Cassio asks again for Desdemona's help, and because he enters with Iago, we can assume Iago has prompted this. So if we start at line 116, Desdemona tells the men that her husband is altered. My lord is not my lord. She tells Cassio that he has to be patient. You must a while be patient, highlighted here. And she promises, what I can do, I will, and more I will than for myself I dare. So she says she'll do more for him than she will for herself. And there's a sense of selflessness here, but there's also a naivety and a youthful ignorance about how a marriage should work. She's showing a loyalty to Cassio here that really should be to Othello. And very much still intruding on a decision that is nothing really to do with her. At the page end, Desdemona asks Iago, Iago offers, and Desdemona, say, please go after Othello and look after him, because he seems so out of sorts. Arguably, I've been a bit blunt in my annotation, sorry, but arguably Desdemona ought to be doing that. If not even your husband, if your best friend or someone that your person, your special person in the world, if they're not feeling right, it's absolutely your responsibility, and maybe not even responsibility, but you should want to go after them and make sure they're okay. So Desdemona shows here insecurity with her husband, that she doesn't really know how to handle him in this mood, and again we've got that feeling that they are very young lovers and that they've still got a lot to learn about each other. And at this point in their relationship, Desdemona feels that Othello's friends know him better than she does, and I guess that's the same case nowadays. If you're in the early stages of a relationship, you would expect the friends to know them better than you. But of course, nowadays we wouldn't be married to them at this stage. Usually, it would be, you'd hope, for most people there would be time to build up that understanding, so that by the time you do get married, you do know them better than anybody else. But of course, that wasn't the case in Shakespeare's day. Okay, so if we turn over to page 139, at the top of the page, Desdemona tells us that she assumes that work is the problem. So something short of state that's wrong with Othello. Okay, and then we're going to focus a little bit on these lines here. So we must think that men are not gods, nor of them look for such observancy as fits the bridal. And there's a couple of explanations on the left-hand side for here. So there's that idea that she's lowering her expectations of Othello. So, and the idea that, you can't expect a man to maintain the same standard or attentive nature that he had on their wedding night. So Desdemona's trying to say, it's nothing I've done wrong, it's not him, it's just actually, this is just the reality of what life's like now. I can't expect him to always be doting on me and loving me in the same way he showed us in Act 2 when he first saw her and he greets her, and they have that lovely exchange, don't they? So Desdemona is trying to justify Othello's actions to her, and is perhaps giving him too much credit, and actually maybe she should be a little bit more inquisitive. And I guess if she was less quick to explain his behaviour, she might spend more time questioning it and therefore she might find out more about it and therefore be able to help him more and actually find out what's going on. But I think regardless of that, this does symbolise love's journey in every relationship, where of course flaws appear over time and a more realistic person emerges from the fantasy that we first envision when we fall for someone. And of course, when you're first with somebody, you put more effort in, and of course you can't sustain that over time. But there's a real sense here that something has been lost, that Iago has really stripped away many of Othello's good qualities, and already their relationship has, the bubble has been burst, their newlywed bubble has been burst at this point. And that's a really tragic, it happened so quickly, and it's all happened because of Iago. I just really wish they would just communicate. It's really frustrating. So she ends the speech here, worried that she's maybe misrepresented him in public, which is really lovely of her. But then Emilia warns she'd better hope it's the state and not some jealous toy concerning her. So again, there's a sense that Emilia is very well versed with jealousy, and presumably through Iago, that's the case, and she knows the damage that it can do. Okay, so there's the sense here that Emilia has been through it, and she knows, and she's saying, you better hope that actually it's not jealousy and it's not about you. So this is developed very much in her next speech. Desdemona says that I never gave him cause, which of course is definitely the case. But jealous souls will not be answered. So it doesn't matter that you haven't given him cause. So Emilia really understands jealousy. It doesn't matter what that because jealousy will not listen to that practical or logical thought process. So they are not ever jealous for the cause, but jealous for the jealous. Jealousy doesn't need anything to cause the jealousy. Once it starts like a fire, it will just keep consuming itself and growing, destroying everything. It is a monster begot upon itself and born on itself. Okay, so it's the idea that jealousy can quickly spiral, and that once it's come about, it grows and multiplies like a virus. And Shakespeare highlights that over and over. In this case, and he's comparing it to a monster. I'm comparing it to all sorts of other things, aren't I? Fires and viruses, but the core image here that it is a monster. And this absolutely cross-references to Act 3, Scene 3, when Iago says that it's a green eye monster, and it does mock the meat it feeds on. So make sure you link those two lines, because I think it's really important, because it shows us that Emilia's understanding of jealousy is very similar to Iago's, and perhaps that is because this is a conversation they have had many times in their marriage. You can imagine what Iago has put Emilia through from his own jealousy and from trying to find out if she did cheat with Othello and or Cassio. And Desdemona has this really tragic line then, heaven keep that monster from Othello's mind. So she's praying that he never experiences it. And of course, it is too late. He's already experiencing it. He's already in that frame of mind. And again, it shows Desdemona's naivety, that she can't see that in a husband. Emilia knows. Emilia says, is this man not jealous, on the previous few pages. So it's really, really tragic that Desdemona can't see that that's the case. Okay. Desdemona then asks Cassio to stay around. Cassio walk her about, which then makes it easier for Bianca to find him. And when Bianca finds him, Cassio gives her the handkerchief, which then sets up the terrible events in Act 4, where Othello thinks he has proof because Bianca has his handkerchief. So possibly not the best decision by Desdemona here, but how on earth was she to know that? So very innocent mistake. So to end this scene then, Bianca comes in, and you can see how Cassio speaks to her very lovingly here, very lovely. Fair Bianca, in faith, my sweet love, I was coming to your house. Not the case, because he's still trying to get Desdemona to help, isn't he? So he's trying to keep her sweet. He's trying to be kind to her here. And I think that's important, because in Act 4 he treats her, he talks to Iago about her in a very different way. So this last page is all Cassio and Bianca. Okay, so this is the first time that we meet Bianca, And we find out that Cassio has not been to see her for a week. So 7 days and nights he's not been to see her. Um, Now, this makes sense because we know Cassio's been distressed about losing his job and losing his reputation, and he's been stalking Desdemona. That's an exaggeration. Please don't write that in your essays. So it's unlikely that he's wanted to see her. But we can see that Bianca has truly missed him when she says, lovers' absent hours are more tedious. Yeah, when you're not there, the hours seem longer. Which reminds me of a line from Romeo and Juliet, but I won't get sidetracked with that now. So at first, Cassio is really polite and says, "Pardon me, Bianca." He calls her Sweet Bianca again. And then he asks her to copy the embroidery on Desdemona's handkerchief, which he has found in his bedroom, and he likes it, so he wants a copy. So that's what happens on the rest of this page. So we know that he wants her to copy a handkerchief because he says, "Take me this work out." And if you have a look at the translation, that's what it means. Okay. So Bianca's initial reaction to seeing Cassio with a random woman's handkerchief who he wants to get to copy is to ask, where has this come from? This is some token from a newer friend. And so she basically assumes here that Cassio has spent the week with another woman who had this handkerchief, and that's why he's not been to see her, which of course is not the case. So this is again this idea of what jealousy can do. It can immediately make you suspicious, but this, I think, is symbolic of the wider issues with jealousy. This jealousy is coming from the fact that Bianca clearly cares more about Cassio than Cassio cares about her. So actually we've got that sense there that jealousy is born from that insecurity and that feeling of inequality in the relationship. Now, Cassio has no patience for the jealousy at all. And he says here, "Go to, woman. Throw your vile guesses in the devil's teeth." He's just got no time for it at all. And the way he speaks to Bianca reminds me of the way Iago speaks to Emilia in Act 2, Scene 1, and also when she gives him the handkerchief. He's just got no patience for her. He just wants her to do what he needs her for, and otherwise he's not interested. And poor Bianca, who's obviously besotted, takes this treatment, okay? And he even says, "You are jealous now," yeah? But he tries to reassure her and says, you think this is from some mistress, but it's not, by my faith, Bianca." So Bianca asks whose it is, and Cassio says, "I don't know. I know not neither. I found it in my chamber." So we now know for certain as an audience that this is Desdemona's. Iago has put it there, and he says, "I like the work well. I like the embroidery. I'd like you to copy it for me because it's really lovely." Possibly he's going to give it as a present to his wife. Who knows? He says, "Take it and do it and then leave me." So that's what he wants her to do. His orders is about. Now he wants to be left alone in case Othello comes back because he doesn't want Othello to see him womaned. Okay? In other words, he is worried that his reputation will be damaged if Cassio sees him with what we assume is a prostitute. He thinks it's going to ruin his reputation further. Then the scene ends on a really sour note for Bianca here. She just comes across as quite desperate to spend time with him. She's forced to accept whatever Cassio can offer, and all he'll offer her, he doesn't even say "I love you." He says, "Not that I love you not." And then he says, "I'll see you soon." That's it. Because he has to attend something here. Obviously, he's trying to get Othello back get back in Othello's favour. And then she just says, "Oh, okay, I must put up with that." It's not a great look for Cassio. So she is lowering her expectations of love, just like Desdemona did a few pages back. So overall in this scene, there's a sense that the men are very much in charge, while the women are left confused. They're very uncertain about what's going on and how their men are feeling. Perhaps Emilia is an exception to that. However, her silence in this scene is out of loyalty to her husband. So even with her, it's a man pulling the strings and controlling the situation and controlling how she's contributing to that. So, arguably, she's not an exception at all. And that ends Act 3.